Picture this for a moment. Right now, you're 32 years old, but somewhere out there, in a parallel universe, there's another version of you. This other you made one critical decision 5 years ago that changed everything. They decided to stop making excuses. They decided to stop waiting for the perfect moment. They decided to stop blaming their circumstances and start creating their future. That version of you is living the life you dream about at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep. They wake up excited about their work instead of dreading Monday mornings. They're in a relationship that actually feels like partnership instead of settling for someone who's just okay. They live in a place they chose, not a place they ended up in because it was cheap or convenient. They look in the mirror and see someone they're genuinely proud of. Meanwhile, here you are, still saying, someday. Still saying, when things settle down. Still saying, when I have more money, or when I have more time, or when the economy gets better, or when my kids are older, or when I'm more prepared. You've been saying these things for how long now? A year? 5 years? 10 years? And here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to tell you. Every single day that passes, the gap between you and that other version of yourself gets wider. Every day you spend making excuses. They're spending taking action. Every day you spend waiting for conditions to be perfect. They're making progress with imperfect conditions. Every day you spend convincing yourself why you can't. They're proving to themselves why they can. So let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. When are you actually going to stop? When are you going to stop letting fear dress up as logic? When are you going to stop letting comfort disguise itself as wisdom? When are you going to stop treating your dreams like they're optional instead of essential? Because here's what I know about you. Even though we've never met, 10 years from now, you're going to be somewhere. You're going to be doing something. You're going to be someone. The only question is whether that someone is going to be living with pride or living with regret. Whether you'll look back at this moment, think that's when everything changed, or that's when I let another opportunity slip away. Today could be the day you finally kill your excuses, or it could be just another day where you let them kill your potential. The choice, as always, has been yours all along. Let me tell you about Michael Thompson, 34 years old, living in Portland, Oregon, working a job he absolutely hates at a marketing firm downtown. Every Sunday night, like clockwork, Michael would sit on his couch with a knot in his stomach, dreading Monday morning. He'd been in this job for 7 years, watching his soul slowly drain away with every pointless meeting, every meaningless presentation, every fake smile he had to plaster on his face. Michael had dreams once, big dreams. He wanted to open his own coffee roasting business. He'd spent years learning everything about coffee, different beans, roasting techniques, flavor profiles. He had notebooks full of business plans, sketches of what his cafe would look like, even a name picked out, Grounded Dreams Coffee Company. He'd tell people about it sometimes, usually after a couple of beers, when his guard was down, and they'd say it sounded amazing. They'd say he should totally do it, but Michael never did it. Because Michael had excuses. Really good excuses. Excuses that sounded so reasonable, so logical, that even he believed them. I don't have enough capital to start a business right now, he'd say. The coffee market in Portland is already saturated. I need to wait until I have more savings. I can't risk my stable income with a family to support. Maybe in a few years, when the kids are older and we're more financially secure. These excuses felt like wisdom. They felt like mature, responsible thinking. And that's exactly what makes excuses so dangerous. They don't feel like excuses. They feel like valid reasons. They feel like common sense. They masquerade as prudence and careful planning when they're actually just fear wearing a suit and tie. Here's what most people don't understand about excuses. They're not just random thoughts that pop into your head. They're sophisticated defense mechanisms that your brain has developed to protect you from the discomfort of change, from the risk of failure, from the vulnerability of trying something that might not work out. Your brain is literally designed to keep you safe, and in your brain's primitive risk assessment system, safe means familiar, even if familiar is miserable. Think about it this way. Your ancestors who took crazy risks, who jumped off cliffs to see if they could fly, who ate random poisonous berries just to try something new, those ancestors didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. The ancestors who survived and became your genetic lineage were the cautious ones, the ones who were suspicious of anything new, the ones who stayed in the cave even when the cave was uncomfortable, because at least the cave was known. That's why excuses feel so right. They're activating ancient survival circuits in your brain that are screaming danger, unknown territory, stay where you are. And your brain is very, very good at manufacturing logical sounding reasons to justify its emotional resistance to change. Let me break down the anatomy of an excuse for you, because once you understand the structure, you can start dismantling them. Every excuse, no matter how it's phrased, contains three core components. First, there's the external attribution. The excuse places the locus of control outside of yourself. I don't have enough money. The market is too competitive. I don't have the right connections. Notice how all of these statements make your success dependent on external factors that you supposedly can't control. Second, there's the temporal displacement. The excuse pushes your action into some undefined future. When I have more savings, when the economy improves, when I'm more prepared. This is brilliant psychology because it allows you to maintain your identity as someone who has ambitions and dreams while never actually having to test those dreams against reality. You're not giving up on your dream, you're just postponing it. Indefinite. Third, there's the reasonableness coating. The excuse is wrapped in language that makes it sound mature, responsible, and logical. Nobody wants to admit they're afraid, so instead, they say they're being realistic, or practical, or strategic. Fear gets to cosplay as wisdom. Michael's excuses about his coffee business hit all three components perfectly. He attributed his inability to start to external factors like capital and market saturation. He displaced action into an undefined future when conditions would be better, and he coated it all in the language of responsible family man, making smart financial decisions. But here's what Michael didn't see, and what most people don't see. While he was waiting for perfect conditions, years were passing. His kids were growing up, his passion was dimming, his confidence was eroding, and most importantly, other people with the same dream, but fewer excuses, were actually doing it. They were starting coffee businesses. They were taking risks. They were failing sometimes, learning, adjusting, and succeeding. I met Michael at a conference where I was speaking about entrepreneurship. and personal development. After my talk, he came up to me during the break, and we started talking. He told me about his coffee dreams and his very reasonable reasons for not pursuing them yet. And I asked him one simple question that changed everything. Michael, how old will you be in 5 years if you don't start this business? He looked confused. I'll be 39, he said. Exactly, I replied. You're going to be 39 either way. The question is, do you want to be 39 with 5 years of experience building your dream business, or 39 with 5 more years of experience making excuses? That question hit him like a freight train, because time is the one resource you absolutely cannot get back. Money can be earned, skills can be learned, connections can be made, but time, once it's gone forever. And every day you spend not pursuing your real goals is a day you're spending on someone else's goals, or no goals at all. Michael stood there in that conference hallway, and I could see something shifting in his eyes. It was like watching someone wake up from a long sleep. I've wasted 7 years, he said quietly. No, I corrected him. You've spent 7 years learning what you don't want. Now you get to spend the next 7 years building what you do want, but only if you stop right now with the excuses. We talked for another hour. I helped him see how every single one of his excuses was actually just a problem to solve, not a wall to stop at. Not enough capital. Start smaller. Test your roasting at farmers markets on weekends while keeping your day job. Saturated market. Find your unique angle. Maybe you focus on sustainable sourcing, or rare single origin beans, or educational workshops. Family to support. Build slowly and strategically instead of jumping in blindly. 3 months later, Michael sent me a photo. It was him at a farmer's market in Portland with a small booth, bags of his freshly roasted coffee lined up, and the biggest smile I've ever seen on a grown man's face. The sign above his booth read Grounded Dreams Coffee Company, roasted with purpose. He'd actually done it. Not the full cafe yet, but he'd started. He'd killed the excuses and taken the first real step. Within 18 months, Michael had quit his marketing job and opened a small roasting facility. 2 years after that, he had his first cafe. Today, 5 years after that conversation in the conference hallway, Grounded Dreams has 3 locations in Portland and ships coffee to customers across the country. Michael went from Sunday night dread to Monday morning excitement, from excuses to execution, from dreaming to doing. But here's the thing that Michael told me that really matters. He said, the hardest part wasn't the business logistics or the financial risk or any of the practical challenges. The hardest part was admitting to myself that I'd been lying to myself for years, that my excuses weren't reasons. They were just fear with a sophisticated vocabulary. That's the first step in killing your excuses. Recognition. You have to get brutally honest with yourself about what's actually holding you back. And 99 times out of 100, it's not the thing you're saying is holding you back. It's fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of finding out that maybe you're not as capable as you think you are. Fear of success and all the changes that would bring. Fear of leaving the comfort of the known for the uncertainty of the unknown. Your excuses are the armor that fear wears when it goes out in public, and until you recognize them for what they are, they'll keep you exactly where you are right now, which is exactly where you'll still be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, until you run out of time and all you have left is regret. Let's get specific, because I want you to see yourself in this section. I'm going to walk through the most common excuses people use to avoid pursuing their real goals. And I want you to notice which ones sound familiar, not because I'm trying to make you feel bad, but because recognition is the first step toward liberation. Excuse number 1, and this is the heavyweight champion of excuses. I don't have enough money. This one is brilliant because it sounds so completely reasonable. How can you start a business without money? How can you go back to school without tuition? How can you make a career change without savings to fall back on? The excuse feels airtight, but here's the reality. Most people who say they don't have enough money actually mean they're not willing to be uncomfortable about money for a period of time. They're not willing to reduce their lifestyle temporarily, not willing to work 2 jobs for a while, not willing to exhaust all creative financing options, not willing to start smaller than they originally envisioned. Let me tell you about Sarah Chen from San Francisco. Sarah wanted to become a therapist, but she was working as a paralegal and convinced herself she couldn't afford to go back to school for a master's degree in counseling. She had student loans from undergrad, rent in an expensive city, and a lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. I don't have $80,000 for grad school, she'd say. Case closed. Except it wasn't closed. When Sarah finally decided to kill this excuse, she discovered options she'd never seriously explored because she'd accepted defeat before even trying. She found a part-time master's program that let her keep working. She got a graduate assistantship that covered half her tuition. She moved to a cheaper apartment with roommates for 3 years. She stopped eating out and cancelled subscriptions she didn't need. She applied for every scholarship and grant she could find. Was it comfortable? Absolutely not. Did it require sacrifice? Completely. But was it possible? 100% yes. 3 years later, Sarah had her degree and a thriving therapy practice. And she told me something profound. She said, I spent 5 years saying I couldn't afford grad school. Then I spent 3 years actually doing it. The only difference was that I stopped accepting my excuse as truth and started treating it as a problem to solve. That's the key distinction. Excuses frame things as impossible. Problems frame things as solvable. When you say, I don't have enough money, you're using excuse framing. When you say, how can I create or access the money I need, you're using problem-solving framing. One shuts down possibilities, the other opens them up. Excuse number 2. I don't have enough time. This is the close second to money as the most popular excuse on planet Earth. Everyone is busy. Everyone has responsibilities. Everyone has only 24 hours in a day. Therefore goes the logic. I simply don't have time to pursue my goals. Except that's not actually true. What you mean when you say you don't have time is that you haven't made it a priority. You haven't decided that this thing is important enough to rearrange your life around. You haven't been willing to sacrifice the things you're currently spending time on to make room for what you say you want. I worked with a guy named David Martinez in Austin, Texas. David wanted to write a novel. He'd wanted to write a novel for 15 years. He had the story in his head. He had characters he thought about. He even had the first chapter written, but he didn't have time to write. David worked a demanding job in tech. He had 2 young kids. He had a house that needed maintenance, and a yard that needed mowing, and a marriage that needed attention. So when did David find time to watch Netflix? 3 hours most evenings. When did he find time to scroll through social media? Multiple hours per day. When did he find time to play video games? Saturday afternoons. David had time. He just didn't have prioritization. When David finally killed this excuse, he didn't magically get more hours in his day. He got ruthlessly honest about his time. He realized he was spending probably 20 hours a week on entertainment that didn't matter to him nearly as much as writing his novel would. So he made a deal with himself. Write for 1 hour before work, every single day. No negotiations, no excuses. 1 hour. You know what happened? 18 months later, David had a finished novel. Not a perfect novel, but a complete first draft of 80,000 words. And he told me, I didn't need more time. I needed to stop lying to myself about where my time was actually going. The truth about time is this: you will always find time for what you truly prioritize. If your child got sick, you'd find time to take them to the doctor. If your boss gave you an urgent project, you'd find time to complete it. If someone offered you $1 million to do something for an hour, you'd find that hour. The time exists. The question is whether your goal is actually important enough to you to sacrifice something else you're currently doing. Excuse number 3. I'm too old, or its cousin. I'm too young. These are age-based excuses that create arbitrary barriers that don't actually exist. Too old to start a new career. Too old to learn a new skill. Too old to get in shape. Too old to find love. Or on the flip side, too young to be taken seriously. Too young to start a business. Too young to know what you really want. Let me destroy this excuse right now with some facts. Colonel Sanders was 62 when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken. Vera Wang didn't design her first dress until she was 40. Samuel L. Jackson didn't get his first major role until he was 43. Laura Ingalls Wilder didn't publish her first Little House book until she was 64. And on the other side, Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook at 19. Malala Yousafzai won the Nobel Peace Prize at 17. Mozart composed his first piece at 5. Age is not the barrier. Your belief about age is the barrier. Yes, certain physical careers have age limitations. You're probably not going to become an Olympic gymnast if you're starting at 50, but for the vast majority of goals that people actually have, career changes, starting businesses, learning new skills, improving health, finding relationships, age is completely irrelevant. I knew a woman named Patricia Williams in Phoenix who decided at 63 years old that she wanted to become a yoga instructor. Everyone told her she was crazy. You're too old, they said. Yoga instruction is for young, flexible people. Who's going to take classes from a 63-year-old woman? Patricia told all of them, politely, to mind their own business. She spent 2 years getting certified, practicing, learning. 65. She started teaching yoga classes, specifically designed for older adults and people with limited mobility. Guess what? Her classes became the most popular in her city because she understood her students' bodies, their limitations, their fears in a way that 25-year-old instructors couldn't. Patricia found her niche exactly because of her age, not in spite of it. She's 71 now and teaches 6 classes a week to devoted students who swear she's changed their lives. And Patricia told me the only thing I was too old for was believing the people who said I was too old. Excuse number 4. I'm not talented enough, or I don't have the right skills. This is the credentialism excuse, the belief that you need perfect qualifications before you can begin. You need a degree, you need a certification, you need more training, you need to be naturally gifted, otherwise, why even try? This excuse is particularly insidious because it masquerades as humility and self-awareness when it's actually just another form of fear. Here's the truth. Most skills can be learned. Most knowledge can be acquired. Most expertise is developed through doing, not through having perfect preparation before you start. You know who else didn't have the right qualifications? The Wright brothers didn't have engineering degrees when they built the first airplane. They owned a bicycle shop. Steve Jobs didn't have a degree in computer science or business when he started Apple. He dropped out of college after one semester. Oprah Winfrey was told she was unfit for television early in her career. J.K. Rowling had never published a book when she wrote Harry Potter. The pattern is clear. Most people who achieve extraordinary things started without perfect qualifications. They started with interest, commitment, and a willingness to learn as they went. They built their qualifications through doing the thing, not before doing the thing. I'm not saying expertise doesn't matter. I'm saying that waiting until you feel perfectly qualified is a trap that will keep you waiting forever, because here's the secret. You'll never feel completely ready even after you have the credentials. Your brain will find new reasons why you're not quite qualified enough yet. There was a woman named Jennifer Park in Seattle who wanted to start a graphic design business. But Jennifer didn't go to design school. She was self-taught, learning through online courses and YouTube tutorials and lots of practice. Her excuse was, "I'm not a real designer because I don't have a degree." This excuse kept her from even trying to get clients for 3 years. When Jennifer finally killed that excuse and started offering her services, you know what she discovered? Clients didn't care about her degree. They cared about her portfolio, her creativity, her reliability, and her prices. Within a year, Jennifer had more work than she could handle. Within 2 years, she'd hired 2 employees. Her lack of formal credentials didn't matter one bit in the real world. The truth is, the market doesn't care about your excuses or your qualifications. It cares about value. Can you solve a problem? Can you create something people want? Can you serve a need? If yes, then you're qualified enough to start. You can get better as you go. Now that you've seen the catalogue of common excuses, we need to go deeper. We need to understand why your brain is so incredibly good at creating these excuses in the first place. Because once you understand the psychology behind excuse making, you can start interrupting the pattern before it even begins. Your brain has 2 primary operating systems, and understanding how they work together is crucial to killing your excuses. Neuroscientists call them System 1 and System 2, but I'm going to call them what they really are: the automatic mind and the deliberate mind. The automatic mind is fast, emotional, instinctive, and incredibly powerful. It's the part of your brain that makes you pull your hand away from a hot stove before you consciously register the pain. It's the part that recognizes your mother's face in a crowd instantly. It's the part that feels fear when you're standing at the edge of a cliff. The automatic mind is ancient, evolved over millions of years to keep you alive in a dangerous world. The deliberate mind is slow, logical, analytical, and effortful. It's the part of your brain that solves math problems, plans for the future, weighs pros and cons, and makes rational decisions The deliberate mind is relatively new in evolutionary terms. It's the part that makes you uniquely human, that allows for abstract thinking and long-term planning. Here's the problem. The automatic mind is much, much stronger than the deliberate mind. When there's a conflict between what feels right emotionally and what makes sense logically, emotion wins about 90% of the time. And excuses are the automatic mind's way of getting what it wants, while making the deliberate mind think it's making a logical choice. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you've set your alarm for 5 in the morning because you've committed to going to the gym before work. When that alarm goes off in the dark at 5 a.m., your automatic mind immediately screams danger. It's dark, it's cold, you're tired. Sleep is necessary for survival. This is crazy. Your automatic mind doesn't care about your fitness goals. It cares about immediate comfort and energy conservation. But you can't just say, I don't want to go because I'm comfortable in bed, because that sounds weak and undisciplined. So, your deliberate mind, which is being hijacked by your automatic mind's emotional resistance, manufactures a logical sounding excuse. I'm actually too tired. If I go to the gym exhausted, I might hurt myself. The responsible thing is to get proper rest. I'll go tomorrow when I'm better rested. See what happened there? Your automatic mind's desire for comfort got dressed up in the deliberate mind's language of logic and responsibility. You get to stay in bed and feel good about your decision. That's the genius and the danger of excuses. They let you avoid discomfort while maintaining your self-image as someone who makes good decisions. This pattern plays out thousands of times in your life. Every time you're about to do something uncomfortable but important, your automatic mind sounds the alarm, and your deliberate mind starts manufacturing excuses to justify not doing it. And because the excuses sound so reasonable, you believe them. You genuinely think you're making smart choices when you're actually just being controlled by your need for comfort. There's another psychological principle at play here, called cognitive dissonance. This is the discomfort you feel when you hold two contradictory beliefs at the same time. For example, I'm a capable person with important goals, and I'm not taking any action toward those goals. Those two beliefs create psychological tension. Your brain desperately wants to resolve this tension, and it has two options. Option 1, change your behavior to align with your goals. This requires effort, discomfort, and risk. Option 2, change your beliefs about why you're not acting. This requires nothing but a good excuse. Guess which option your brain prefers. So you create excuses that resolve the cognitive dissonance without requiring you to change your behavior. I'm not acting on my goals right now because I don't have enough money. Now there's no contradiction. You're still a capable person with important goals. You're just temporarily prevented from acting by external circumstances beyond your control. Tension resolved, comfort maintained, goals safely postponed. I worked with a man named Robert Chen in Boston who had been planning to start his own consulting business for 8 years. 8 years. Every year, he had new and perfectly reasonable excuses for why this wasn't quite the right time yet. But the real reason, which Robert didn't want to admit to himself, was that he was terrified of failing, terrified that he'd discover he wasn't as good as he thought he was, terrified that clients wouldn't hire him, terrified that he'd end up broke and embarrassed. Those fears were real and understandable, but Robert couldn't admit to himself that fear was the reason, because that would mean confronting the fear. So instead, his brain manufactured a rotating collection of excuses. Economy's bad, need more savings, family obligations, wrong time in the industry cycle. Each excuse was plausible enough to convince Robert that he was being smart and strategic rather than scared and stuck. When Robert finally broke through this pattern, it wasn't because his circumstances changed. It was because he got honest with himself about what was really happening. He admitted out loud to a trusted friend, "I'm not starting my business because I'm afraid I'll fail and everyone will see that I'm not as competent as they think I am." That admission was painful. It made Robert feel vulnerable and exposed, but it was also liberating because you can't solve a problem until you correctly identify it. Once Robert named the real issue, he could address it directly. He found a therapist who specialized in performance anxiety. He started small by taking on a few consulting projects on the side while keeping his job. He joined a support group for entrepreneurs. He worked on building evidence that he could actually do this instead of avoiding the test entirely. 2 years later, Robert had a thriving consulting practice and more confidence than he'd ever had in his life. But none of that would have happened if Robert had kept believing his excuses. As long as he thought the problem was external circumstances, he was powerless to change anything. When he realized the problem was internal fear, he suddenly had agency and options. This is the fundamental shift you need to make. Stop asking, "What's preventing me from doing this?" and start asking, "What am I afraid will happen if I do this?" The first question leads to excuses. The second question leads to truth, and only truth can set you free. There's one more psychological mechanism we need to talk about: the sunk cost fallacy. This is the tendency to continue investing in something because you've already invested so much, even when it no longer makes sense to do so, and it applies to excuses in a particularly insidious way. Let's say you've been telling yourself for 5 years that you can't change careers because you've already invested so much time in your current field. You have a decade of experience, established relationships, a certain level of seniority. Starting over would mean throwing all that away, so you stay in a career you hate because of sunk costs. But here's what the sunk cost fallacy makes you forget. Those costs are already sunk. You can't get those 10 years back, whether you change careers or not. The only question that actually matters: what's the best use of your next 10 years? Staying in a career you hate to justify the time you've already spent there, or moving towards something that actually fulfills you. I knew a woman named Amanda Rodriguez in Miami who spent 15 years as a corporate lawyer. She made great money. She had prestige. She had a corner office, and she was absolutely miserable. But every time she thought about doing something different, her brain would scream, "You went to law school. You spent 3 years and $100,000. You've built this entire career. You can't just throw it all away." That's the sunk cost fallacy talking. Amanda had already spent 15 years being miserable. The question wasn't whether those 15 years were wasted. They were already gone. The question was whether she wanted to spend the next 15 years the same way. When Amanda finally understood this, she realized she wasn't throwing anything away by changing directions. She was refusing to throw away her future by clinging to her past. Amanda left corporate law and retrained as a mediator specializing in family conflicts. She makes less money now, but she loves her work. She helps people during some of the hardest times in their lives. She goes home feeling fulfilled instead of depleted, and she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "The only thing I regret is not doing this 10 years ago. But I couldn't do it 10 years ago until I stopped using those 10 years as an excuse." Understanding the psychology of excuse making doesn't make excuses disappear. Your automatic mind will still resist discomfort. You'll still experience cognitive dissonance. You'll still feel the pull of sunk costs. But understanding these mechanisms gives you the power to recognize what's happening when it happens. You can catch yourself in the act of manufacturing excuses, and that awareness is the first step toward choosing something different. Let's talk about something that nobody wants to admit. Comfort is expensive. Not expensive in terms of money, although sometimes it is. Expensive in terms of what it costs you in potential, in growth, in the life you could have lived if you'd been willing to be uncomfortable for a while. Every excuse you make, every time you choose comfort over growth, you're making a trade. You're trading your future for your present. You're trading possibility for certainty. You're trading the person you could become for the person you currently are. And most people make this trade unconsciously, over and over, until they wake up one day and realize they've traded away their entire life. Think about where you are right now in your life. Your job, your relationships, your health, your finances, your daily routine. How much of your current situation is the result of conscious choice versus the path of least resistance? How many times did you choose comfort over challenge? How many opportunities did you pass up because they required too much change, too much risk, too much discomfort? I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it to wake you up, because the gravitational pull of comfort is so strong that most people never escape it. They spend their entire lives in what I call the comfort prison. And the particularly cruel thing about the comfort prison is that the bars are invisible. You can't see them, so you don't even realize you're trapped. Let me tell you about a man named James Peterson from Denver. James was 52 years old when I met him, and he was having what people politely call a midlife crisis. But what was really a midlife awakening? James had done everything right according to conventional wisdom: good college, stable job in accounting, married his college sweetheart, bought a house in the suburbs, had 2 kids, contributed to his 401k. He'd followed the script perfectly, but James was profoundly unhappy. He'd been unhappy for years, maybe decades, but he'd been too busy following the script to notice. Then his father died suddenly at 73, and it shook James to his core. His father had also followed the script perfectly, and he died never having done most of the things he actually wanted to do. Never traveled to Ireland, where his ancestors were from. Never learned to play the guitar he bought 15 years earlier. Never wrote the memoir he always talked about writing. James looked at his father's life and saw his own future, and he was terrified because he realized he'd been making the same trade his father had made over and over, trading dreams for security, trading passion for stability, trading life for comfort. When James came to talk to me, he was angry, not at anyone else, but at himself. "I've wasted 30 years being comfortable," he said. "I have a job I don't care about, doing work that doesn't matter, counting down the days until retirement so I can finally start living." But my dad did the same thing. And you know what? He had 6 months of retirement before he died. 6 months after 45 years of waiting. I asked James a hard question. If you keep going the way you're going, what will your life look like at 73? James sat there for a long time, and then he started to cry, because he knew the answer. It would look exactly like his father's life, safe, stable, comfortable, and full of regret for all the things he never did. "So what are you going to do differently?" I asked. James took a deep breath. "I don't know," he said. "But I know," he said. "But I know I can't keep doing this. I'd rather be uncomfortable and alive than comfortable and dead inside." That conversation was 4 years ago. James made some big changes. He left his accounting job and started working part-time as a financial coach for small business owners, something he'd always wanted to do but never thought he could. He and his wife, after some hard conversations, sold their big house in the suburbs and moved to a smaller place in the mountains that they'd always dreamed about. He started hiking and photography, things he'd been too busy for before. Is James's life more comfortable now? Absolutely not. He makes less money. He has less security. He deals with more uncertainty. But James is happy. Actually, genuinely happy for the first time in decades. And he told me recently, "I spent 30 years choosing comfort over happiness. Now I choose happiness over comfort. And it turns out, happiness is worth so much more than I ever imagined." Here's what James discovered, and what you need to understand. Comfort is not the same as happiness. Comfort is the absence of discomfort. Happiness is the presence of meaning, growth, and authentic living. You can be extremely comfortable and extremely unhappy at the same time. In fact, that's where most people live. The comfort prison feels safe because it's familiar. You know what to expect. There are no scary surprises. But it's also slowly suffocating you. Every year you spend in the comfort prison, your world gets a little smaller. Your courage diminishes a little more. Your dreams fade a little further, until eventually you forget you ever had dreams at all. Think about children for a moment. Children are constantly uncomfortable. They're learning to walk, falling down, getting back up, learning to talk, making mistakes, trying again, starting school, making friends, navigating conflict. Children are in a constant state of discomfort because they're in a constant state of growth, and they're full of life, curiosity, energy, and possibility. Now think about older people who've stopped growing. They've found their comfort zone and they've settled into it. Same routine every day, same thoughts every day, same conversations every day. They're not in pain necessarily. They're comfortable, but they're also kind of dead inside. The light has gone out of their eyes. The possibility has drained from their life. The difference between these two states is simple. Growth requires discomfort, always. There is no version of personal growth that doesn't involve leaving your comfort zone. There is no version of achieving your potential that doesn't require you to do things that feel scary and uncertain. There is no version of creating the life you actually want that doesn't involve trading comfort for possibility. And here's the thing about comfort. It's addictive. The more comfort you have, the more comfort you want. The less discomfort you tolerate, the less discomfort you can tolerate. Your comfort zone actually shrinks over time. If you stay in it, things that used to feel manageable start to feel overwhelming. Challenges you used to handle start to feel impossible. I worked with a woman named Lisa Morgan in Chicago, who was brilliant, capable, and completely stuck. Lisa had been working remotely for the same company for 8 years. She never had to commute, never had to deal with office politics, never had to wear anything but sweatpants. It was incredibly comfortable. So comfortable that eventually the thought of doing anything else felt impossible. When her company announced they were transitioning to a hybrid model requiring 3 days in the office per week, Lisa had a full-blown panic attack, not because office work is inherently terrible, but because she'd spent 8 years making her world smaller and smaller. She'd optimized for comfort so completely that any deviation from that comfort felt like a threat to her survival. Lisa's comfort zone had become a cage, and she didn't even realize it until the cage got threatened. That's when she came to me, terrified and convinced that she couldn't possibly adapt to office work again. I can't do it, she kept saying. I physically cannot do it. But Lisa absolutely could do it. There was nothing physically wrong with her. The problem was psychological. She'd conditioned herself to view any discomfort as intolerable. She'd spent years avoiding challenge, and now her capacity for challenge had atrophied like a muscle that never gets used. We had to rebuild Lisa's discomfort tolerance gradually. Small challenges at first. Go to a coffee shop to work instead of home. Attend a networking event. Have a meeting at someone else's office. Each of these things felt incredibly hard to Lisa at first, but as she did them, as she proved to herself that she could handle discomfort, her capacity grew. 6 months later, Lisa was back in the office 3 days a week. And you know what? She told me, I actually like it better this way. I was so isolated before. I was comfortable, but I was lonely and bored and stuck. Now I have variety. I have social connection. I have challenges that make me grow. I didn't realize how much my comfort was costing me. That's the hidden cost of comfort. You think you're protecting yourself by avoiding discomfort, but you're actually making yourself weaker, smaller, less capable. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're practicing helplessness. You're reinforcing the belief that you can't handle hard things, and eventually that belief becomes true, not because you're actually incapable, but because you've trained yourself to be incapable. The people who achieve extraordinary things, the ones who create lives they're actually proud of, they're not more talented than you, they're not luckier than you, they're not more privileged than you, they're just more willing than you to be uncomfortable. They've decided that the temporary pain of growth is worth it compared to the permanent pain of regret. Because here's the brutal truth. You're going to experience pain either way. You can experience the pain of discipline, or you can experience the pain of regret. You can experience the discomfort of challenging yourself, or you can experience the discomfort of wondering what could have been. You can feel the fear of trying and possibly failing, or you can feel the shame of never having tried at all. One of these pains is temporary and leads to growth. The other is permanent and leads to bitterness. Choose wisely. Now we're going to do something that most people never do. We're going to perform an autopsy on your excuses. We're going to dissect them, examine them under a microscope, and see exactly what they're made of. Because once you truly understand the anatomy of your specific excuses, they lose their power over you. I want you to think right now about one big goal you have that you haven't achieved yet. Maybe it's starting a business. Maybe it's getting in shape. Maybe it's writing a book, or changing careers, or ending a toxic relationship. Pick one goal that really matters to you, something you've wanted for a while, but haven't made happen. Got it? Good. Now I want you to ask yourself honestly, what's stopping me? And I want you to listen very carefully to the first answer that comes to your mind. Whatever excuse your brain offers up first, that's your primary excuse. That's the one we need to dissect. Let me walk you through this process using a real example. I worked with a woman named Rebecca Anderson from Seattle. Rebecca had wanted to start a non-profit organization focused on helping homeless youth for over 6 years. She had passion. She had expertise from her social work background. She had a clear vision, but she hadn't started. When I asked Rebecca what was stopping her, she immediately said, "I don't have the funding to launch a non-profit." That was her primary excuse, and it sounded completely reasonable. Non-profits need funding, right? Without money, how can you start an organization? So we started the autopsy. I asked Rebecca, do you actually need funding to start, or do you need funding to scale? She paused. I guess I could start small without much funding, she admitted, but I need money eventually. Okay, I said. So the excuse isn't that you can't start without funding. The excuse is that you're afraid to start small. What are you actually afraid will happen if you start small? Rebecca thought about this. I'm afraid it won't be taken seriously. I'm afraid people will think it's amateur or not legitimate if I don't have a proper office and staff and resources. Now, we were getting somewhere. The excuse had transformed from "I don't have funding" to "I'm afraid of being judged for starting small." These are completely different problems, requiring completely different solutions. We kept going. Who specifically are you afraid will judge you? I asked. Rebecca listed some people, former colleagues in social work, her parents who thought she should stay in her stable job, people in the non-profit sector she admired. And if those people do judge you, I continued, what's the actual consequence? What happens in the real world? Rebecca sat with this question. Nothing, I guess, she finally said. I mean, it would feel bad, but it wouldn't actually stop me from helping people. Do you see what happened here? We started with an excuse that sounded like an insurmountable external barrier. I don't have funding. Through careful examination, we discovered it was actually an internal fear. I'm afraid of being judged, and that fear, when examined, turned out to be about people's opinions, which have no actual power over Rebecca's ability to do the work. This is the excuse autopsy process. You take the surface excuse, and you keep asking deeper questions until you get to the real obstacle. And almost always, the real obstacle is fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discomfort, fear of discovering something about yourself, fear of success and change, fear disguised as logic. Here are the key questions for performing your own excuse autopsy. First question, is this actually preventing me from starting, or is it just making it harder than I'd like? Most excuses are about difficulty, not impossibility. They're about the path being harder than you want it to be, not about the path not existing at all. Second question. Have other people achieved this goal despite having this same obstacle? If the answer is yes, and it almost always is, then your excuse isn't actually a barrier. It's just a challenge that can be overcome. Third question. What would I do if this excuse disappeared tomorrow? This reveals whether the excuse is the real obstacle or just a convenient scapegoat. If you'd still hesitate, even after the excuse was removed, then there's something deeper going on. Fourth question. What am I actually afraid will happen if I pursue this goal? This gets to the emotional truth underneath a logical excuse, and emotional truths, unlike external circumstances, are something you can actually work with and change. Let me give you another example. I worked with a man named Marcus Williams in Atlanta who wanted to become a public speaker and share his story of overcoming addiction to help others. Marcus's excuse was, I don't have any credentials. I'm not a doctor or therapist or expert. Who's going to listen to me? We did the autopsy. Do you need credentials to share your personal story? I asked. Well, no, Marcus admitted. But people won't take me seriously without credentials. Who won't take you seriously? I pushed. Marcus named treatment centers and recovery programs and professional conferences. And are those the only places you could speak? I asked. What about schools, community centers, churches, support groups, online platforms? Marcus realized his excuse was based on a very narrow definition of success. He decided that speaking had to look a certain way, in certain venues, to certain audiences, or it didn't count. That's another common pattern. We create arbitrary criteria for success, and then use our failure to meet those specific criteria as an excuse for not starting at all. We kept digging. What would happen if you spoke somewhere small and it didn't go well? I asked. I'd feel like a failure, Marcus said, and there it was, the real fear. Not that he lacked credentials, but that he'd try and fail and have to face the painful feeling of not being good enough. Once Marcus saw this clearly, everything shifted. He realized he could handle feeling like a failure if it happened. It would be uncomfortable, but it wouldn't destroy him, and that realization freed him to start trying. He began speaking at local recovery meetings, then churches, then schools. Within 2 years, Marcus was doing keynote speeches at major recovery conferences, the exact venues he thought were impossible without credentials. But none of that would have happened if Marcus had kept believing his surface excuse. As long as he thought the problem was lack of credentials, he was stuck. When he discovered the real problem was fear of failure, he could address it directly. This is why the excuse autopsy is so powerful. It forces you to stop arguing with external circumstances and start dealing with internal reality. External circumstances are often outside your control, which makes you powerless. Internal fears and beliefs are within your control, which makes you powerful. Let's do one more example to really drive this home. I knew a woman named Emily Torres from Phoenix who wanted to leave her corporate marketing job and become a full-time artist. Emily's excuse was, I can't afford to quit my job. I have bills to pay and responsibilities. Autopsy time. Do you need to quit your job to be an artist? I asked. Or could you be an artist while keeping your job? Emily thought about it. I guess I could paint in the evenings and weekends. So why haven't you been doing that? I asked. Emily got quiet. I don't know. I guess I'm tired after work. And I tell myself that if I can't do it full time and really commit, then there's no point in doing it at all. There's that all or nothing thinking again. Where did you get the idea that art only counts if it's full time? I asked. Emily laughed. I have no idea. That's ridiculous when you say it out loud. We kept going deeper. What are you actually afraid will happen if you start painting regularly while keeping your job? Emily considered this. I'm afraid I'll discover I'm not actually that good. As long as I don't try, I can keep believing. I could have been a great artist if circumstances had been different, but if I try and I'm mediocre, then I can't blame circumstances anymore. This is a profound fear that many people have but never acknowledge, the fear that your potential isn't as great as you've told yourself. The fear that you're not held back by circumstances, but by your own limitations. As long as you have excuses, you get to maintain the fantasy of who you could have been, if only. But once you remove the excuses and actually try, you have to face reality. I told Emily what I'll tell you now, that fear is completely understandable and completely worth facing, because even if you discover you're not as naturally talented as you hoped, you're still better off trying and finding out than spending your whole life wondering. And more often than not, people discover they're more capable than they feared, not less. Emily started painting again. 2 hours every Saturday morning. That was her commitment, not full time, not even every day, just 2 hours a week. And you know what? She loved it. She wasn't immediately brilliant, but she was improving, and more importantly, she was actually doing the things she'd been telling herself she couldn't do. 3 years later, Emily still has her marketing job, but she's also sold dozens of paintings. She has a studio space she shares with other artists. She teaches painting workshops on weekends. She hasn't quit her job, and probably never will, but she's living as an artist, which was actually the goal all along. The excuse about not being able to afford to quit was just protecting her from facing her fear of not being good enough. This is what I want you to understand. Your excuses are not the problem. They're symptoms of the problem. The actual problem is always fear, and fear is something you can work with. Fear is something you can face, process, and move through. External circumstances, on the other hand, often can't be changed. So it's actually good news when you discover your excuse is just fear in disguise, because it means you have more power than you thought. Take your goal, the one I asked you to think about at the beginning of this chapter. Take your primary excuse for why you haven't achieved it yet, and perform the autopsy. Ask the deeper questions. Be brutally honest with yourself. Dig until you find the fear underneath the excuse, because that fear is the real obstacle, and it's an obstacle you can overcome. Alright, we've spent a lot of time tearing down excuses and exposing fears. Now it's time to build something. It's time to create a blueprint for actually achieving the goals you've been making excuses about. Because understanding your excuses is valuable, but it's not enough. You need a system, a method, a concrete path forward. I'm going to give you what I call the achievement blueprint. This is a framework I've used with hundreds of clients, and it works regardless of what your specific goal is. Whether you want to start a business, write a book, get in shape, change careers, or anything else, this blueprint applies. The achievement blueprint has 5 stages: clarity, commitment, conditions, consistency, and calibration. Let's go through each one. Stage 1 is clarity. You cannot achieve a vague goal. I want to be successful is not a goal. It's a wish. I want to be happy is not a goal. It's a feeling. You need crystal clear specificity about what you're actually trying to achieve. Most people skip this stage entirely and wonder why they never make progress. They have fuzzy ideas of what they want, but they've never defined it clearly enough to know what actions to take or how to measure progress. Let me tell you about a guy named Daniel Kim from San Diego. Daniel came to me saying he wanted to get in better shape. I asked him what that meant specifically. Just be healthier, he said vaguely. We spent an hour getting clarity. What did better shape actually mean to Daniel? Did it mean a specific weight, a specific body fat percentage, being able to run a certain distance, lift a certain amount of weight, fit into certain clothes, have certain blood test results? After really thinking about it, Daniel realized what he actually wanted was to feel strong and energetic throughout the day, without the afternoon crashes he constantly experienced. He wanted to be able to play actively with his kids without getting winded, and he wanted to reverse the pre-diabetic indicators his doctor had warned him about. Now we had clarity, not getting in shape, but have consistent energy. Play actively with kids for at least 30 minutes without exhaustion, and get A1C levels below 5.7 within 6 months. That's a clear goal. That's something you can create a plan around. So your first task is to get brutally specific about your goal. Not just what you want to achieve, but why it matters to you, what it will look and feel like when you achieve it, and how you'll know you've succeeded. Write it down in detail. Make it so clear that someone else could read it and understand exactly what you're trying to do. Stage 2 is commitment. This is where most people fail before they even begin. They want the outcome, but they're not willing to commit to the process. They want the result, but they don't want to pay the price. And I'm going to be blunt with you. If you're not willing to commit fully, don't start, because half-hearted effort produces quarter-hearted results. Commitment means several things. First, it means deciding that this goal is non-negotiable. Not that you'll try, not that you'll do your best, but that you will make this happen no matter what obstacles arise. That's a very different level of commitment than most people bring to their goals. Second, commitment means accepting in advance that there will be costs. Time costs, money costs, opportunity costs, comfort costs. You're going to have to give something up to get what you want. Are you willing to make that trade? If not, you're not actually committed. You're just interested. I worked with a woman named Nicole Henderson in Minneapolis who wanted to get an MBA. She'd been talking about it for years. When we got to the commitment stage, I asked her straight up, are you willing to spend 2 years with almost no free time? Are you willing to take on significant debt or spend your savings? Are you willing to have less time with your family? Are you willing to be stressed and overwhelmed regularly? Nicole hesitated. When you put it that way, I'm not sure, she admitted, and that's completely fine. It's better to admit you're not ready to commit than to start half-heartedly and quit, which damages your confidence and makes it harder to commit in the future. But here's what happened next. Nicole thought about those costs and realized that the cost of not getting her MBA was higher, the cost of staying stuck in her current career trajectory, the cost of always wondering what could have been, the cost of modeling for her children that dreams are just things you talk about but never pursue. When Nicole came back to me 2 weeks later, her energy was completely different. I'm ready, she said. I know it's going to be hard. I know what I'm giving up, and I'm willing to pay that price, because this matters to me. That's real commitment. And Nicole completed her MBA in 2 years with honors while working full-time and raising 2 kids. It was exactly as hard as we discussed, but she did it because she committed fully before she started. Stage 3 is conditions. This is about creating an environment that supports your goal instead of undermining it. Most people try to achieve their goals while leaving all the conditions that work against those goals completely unchanged. Then they wonder why willpower isn't enough. Willpower is a limited resource. You have a certain amount each day, and it gets depleted with use. If you're relying purely on willpower to achieve your goal, you will fail. You need to change your conditions so that the right actions become easier and the wrong actions become harder. Let me give you a concrete example. I knew a man named Travis Morgan in Nashville who wanted to stop drinking. Travis had tried willpower alone many times. He'd decide he wasn't going to drink, and he'd do fine for a few days or weeks. Then he'd have a stressful day, and his roommate would offer him a beer, and there was beer in the fridge, and all his social activities involved bars, and his willpower would crumble. When Travis finally succeeded, it wasn't because his willpower got stronger, it's because he changed his conditions. He moved to a different apartment without a drinking roommate. He didn't keep alcohol in his home. He changed his social activities to hiking and rock climbing instead of bars. He found an Alcoholic Anonymous group that met in the evenings when he used to drink. He told all his friends about his commitment and asked them not to invite him to drinking events. Were these changes uncomfortable? Absolutely. Did they require effort? Yes. But they were one-time efforts that created ongoing support for his goal. Instead of relying on daily willpower to resist temptation, Travis removed the temptation and created new patterns. That's the power of conditions. Think about your goal and ask yourself, what conditions in my life make it harder to achieve this? And what conditions could I create that would make it easier? Then change your conditions before you try to change your behavior. Stage 4 is consistency. This is where execution actually happens. And the key to consistency is not motivation, it's systems. Motivation comes and goes. Systems keep you going when motivation fades. A system is a repeatable process that you follow regardless of how you feel. It's not based on inspiration or willpower. It's based on structure and habit. You do the thing at the same time in the same way until it becomes automatic. I worked with a woman named Jasmine Lee in San Francisco who wanted to write a book. Jasmine had tried many times to write based on motivation When she felt inspired, she'd write for hours. When she didn't feel inspired, which was most of the time, she'd write nothing. After 2 years of this pattern, she had 30,000 words scattered across different documents and no actual book. When Jasmine implemented a system, everything changed. Her system was simple. Write for 30 minutes every morning before checking email or doing anything else. Not when she felt inspired, not when she had a lot of time, not when she knew what to write. Just 30 minutes every single morning, no exceptions. We created a momentum machine for Alicia that was almost laughably simple. 5 minutes of exercise per day. That's it, not a full workout, not even a real sweat session, just 5 minutes. One day she'd do 5 minutes of jumping jacks, another day 5 minutes of yoga, another day a 5-minute walk around her block. It didn't matter what the exercise was, just that she did something for 5 minutes. Alicia thought this was too easy to make a difference. How am I going to get in shape with 5 minutes a day? She asked. You're not, I told her. You're going to build momentum with 5 minutes a day. The shape will come later. And it did. Within 2 weeks, Alicia was often exceeding her 5 minutes because she had momentum. Once she'd started, it felt natural to keep going. After a month, her 5-minute minimum had organically evolved into 20 or 30 minutes most days. After 3 months, she'd joined a gym and was working out for an hour 3 times a week, but she never would have gotten there if she'd started with that goal. The momentum had to build first. 2 years later, Alicia had lost 40 pounds and run her first half marathon, but she still maintained her 5-minute minimum commitment because she understood that the momentum was more important than any single workout. As long as she kept the momentum alive, progress was inevitable. This is what you need to understand about momentum. It's more valuable than intensity. Doing a little bit every single day beats doing a lot occasionally. Consistency creates momentum. Momentum creates results. Intensity without consistency just creates burnout. So here's your momentum machine framework. First, identify the smallest possible action that moves you toward your goal. Not the optimal action, not the impressive action, the smallest action you can take that creates movement in the right direction. Second, commit to doing that small action every single day for 30 days minimum. No exception, no negotiation, no days off. Build the streak, protect the streak. The streak is your momentum. Third, track your streak visually. Put a big calendar on your wall and mark an X for every day you complete your action. Watch the chain of X's grow. That visual representation of momentum is psychologically powerful. You won't want to break the chain. Fourth, give yourself permission to exceed the minimum, but never permission to skip it. Some days you'll do way more than your minimum, and that's great, but the commitment is always to the minimum. That's what protects your momentum on hard days. Fifth, once you have 30 days of momentum, you can gradually increase your minimum if you want to, but don't increase it so much that you risk breaking the streak. Slow, steady growth on top of solid momentum beats aggressive goals that kill momentum. I knew a man named Christopher Lee from Boston who wanted to learn Spanish. Christopher had tried apps, classes, tutors, and immersion programs over the years. Nothing stuck. He'd learn for a while, stop for a while, forget everything, and have to start over. No momentum, just repeated restarts. When Christopher built his momentum machine, he committed to 5 minutes of Spanish per day, just 5 minutes. Some days he used an app. Some days he watched a Spanish YouTube video. Some days he just practiced verb conjugations. It didn't matter what he did, just that he did something. After 1 year of his 5-minute daily commitment, Christopher was conversational in Spanish. Not fluent, but genuinely conversational. He could hold basic conversations, understand most of what he heard, and read Spanish websites and books, all from 5 minutes a day, maintained with absolute consistency. The momentum machine works for any goal, because it's based on a fundamental truth about human psychology. Small wins create confidence. Confidence creates motivation. Motivation creates bigger actions. Bigger actions create results, and results create more confidence. It's a virtuous cycle, but it only starts if you actually start, and the only way to guarantee you'll start is to make starting so easy that excuses can't stop you. Your excuses thrive in the space between your current state and your goal. When that space feels enormous, excuses multiply. I can't write a book. That's too big. I can't get in shape. That's too hard. I can't build a business. That's too overwhelming. But when you shrink that space down to the smallest possible action, excuses have nowhere to hide. Can you write 100 words today? Yes. Can you exercise for 5 minutes today? Yes. Can you make 1 sales call today? Yes. The excuse "I can't" doesn't work anymore because the action is so small that of course you can. And once you do it today, you can do it tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. And before you know it, you have momentum. And momentum is the excuse killer. Alicia thought this was too easy to make a difference. How am I going to get in shape with 5 minutes a day? She asked. You're not, I told her. You're going to build momentum with 5 minutes a day. The shape will come later, and it did. Within 2 weeks, Alicia was often exceeding her 5 minutes, because she had momentum. Once she'd started, it felt natural to keep going. After a month, her 5-minute minimum had organically evolved into 20 or 30 minutes. Most days, after 3 months, she'd joined a gym and was working out for an hour, 3 times a week. But she never would have gotten there if she'd started with that goal. The momentum had to build first. 2 years later, Alicia had lost 40 pounds and run her first half marathon, but she still maintained her 5-minute minimum commitment because she understood that the momentum was more important than any single workout. As long as she kept the momentum alive, progress was inevitable. This is what you need to understand about momentum. It's more valuable than intensity. Doing a little bit every single day beats doing a lot occasionally. Consistency creates momentum. Momentum creates results. Intensity without consistency just creates burnout. So here's your momentum machine framework. First, identify the smallest possible action that moves you toward your goal. Not the optimal action, not the impressive action. The smallest action you can take that creates movement in the right direction. Second, commit to doing that small action every single day for 30 days minimum. No exceptions, no negotiations, no days off. Build the streak. Protect the streak. The streak is your momentum. Third, track your streak visually. Put a big calendar on your wall and mark an X for every day you complete your action. Watch the chain of X's grow That visual representation of momentum is psychologically powerful. You won't want to break the chain. Fourth, give yourself permission to exceed the minimum, but never permission to skip it. Some days you'll do way more than your minimum, and that's great, but the commitment is always to the minimum. That's what protects your momentum on hard days. Fifth, once you have 30 days of momentum, you can gradually increase your minimum if you want to, but don't increase it so much that you risk breaking the streak. Slow, steady growth on top of solid momentum beats aggressive goals that kill momentum. I knew a man named Christopher Lee from Boston who wanted to learn Spanish. Christopher had tried apps, classes, tutors, and immersion programs over the years. Nothing stuck. He'd learn for a while, stop for a while, forget everything, and have to start over. No momentum, just repeated restarts. When Christopher built his momentum machine, he committed to 5 minutes of Spanish per day. Just 5 minutes. Some days he used an app. Some days he watched a Spanish YouTube video. Some days he just practiced verb conjugations. It didn't matter what he did, just that he did something. After 1 year of his 5-minute daily commitment, Christopher was conversational in Spanish. Not fluent, but genuinely conversational. He could hold basic conversations, understand most of what he heard, and read Spanish websites and books, all from 5 minutes a day, maintained with absolute consistency. The momentum machine works for any goal, because it's based on a fundamental truth about human psychology. Small wins create confidence. Confidence creates motivation. Motivation creates bigger actions. Bigger actions create results, and results create more confidence. It's a virtuous cycle, but it only starts if you actually start. And the only way to guarantee you'll start is to make starting so easy that excuses can't stop you. Your excuses thrive in the space between your current state and your goal. When that space feels enormous, excuses multiply. I can't write a book, that's too big. I can't get in shape, that's too hard. I can't build a business, that's too overwhelming. But when you shrink that space down to the smallest possible action, excuses have nowhere to hide. Can you write 100 words today? Yes. Can you exercise for 5 minutes today? Yes. Can you make 1 sales call today? Yes. The excuse I can't doesn't work anymore, because the action is so small that of course you can. And once you do it today, you can do it tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, and before you know it, you have momentum, and momentum is the excuse killer. Chapter 10. The Final Excuse. 6. We're almost at the end of this journey together, and there's one final excuse we need to address. It's the most insidious one, because it masquerades as humility, wisdom, and acceptance. It's the excuse that sounds reasonable, even to people who've killed all their other excuses. And if you don't recognize it and destroy it, it will keep you stuck forever. The final excuse is this: maybe I'm just not meant to achieve this. Maybe it's not in the cards for me. Maybe I should accept where I am and be grateful, instead of always striving for more. This excuse is dangerous because it contains a kernel of truth wrapped in a shell of defeat. Yes, gratitude is important. Yes, acceptance has value. Yes, not every goal is achievable for every person. But this excuse isn't about healthy acceptance or genuine gratitude. It's about fear. dressing up as enlightenment. It's about giving up while pretending you've achieved wisdom. Let me tell you how to distinguish between healthy acceptance and the final excuse. Healthy acceptance comes after you've genuinely tried. It comes after you've given real effort, learned from failures, and discovered either that you don't actually want this goal or that the cost of achieving it is higher than the benefit. Healthy acceptance is an active choice made from a place of knowledge and experience. The final excuse, on the other hand, comes before you've really tried. It's what you tell yourself to avoid. The risk of failure. It's how you protect your ego from the possibility of discovering you're not as capable as you thought. It's the comfortable story that lets you quit without having to admit you're quitting. I worked with a woman named Hannah Foster from Minneapolis who had always dreamed of being a professional singer. Hannah had genuine talent. People who heard her sing were moved, but Hannah had never seriously pursued music professionally. Why? Because at some point she'd accepted the final excuse. Maybe I'm just not meant to be a professional singer. Maybe that's for other people, not me. I should be grateful for my stable job and my comfortable life instead of chasing impossible dreams. When I asked Hannah if she'd really given music a serious try, she had to admit she hadn't. She'd sung in some local shows. She'd posted a few videos online. She'd thought about moving to Nashville or Los Angeles, but never did. She hadn't failed at being a professional singer. She just hadn't actually tried to be a professional singer. But the final excuse let her avoid that uncomfortable truth. The final excuse is seductive because it feels mature and reasonable. Society tells us that at some point we need to grow up and be realistic and accept our limitations. And there's truth in that. For genuinely impossible goals, you're not going to become a professional basketball player if you're 5 feet tall and 45 years old. But most of the goals that people actually have aren't impossible. They're just difficult, uncertain, and scary. Hannah's goal of being a professional singer wasn't impossible. Thousands of people make a living in music. It's hard, yes. Competitive, yes. Uncertain, absolutely, but not impossible. The question wasn't whether Hannah was meant to be a professional singer. The question was whether she was willing to do what it takes to find out. We had an honest conversation about what serious pursuit would look like. Moving to a city with a music scene, taking vocal lessons and performance coaching, performing regularly at every venue that would have her, creating and marketing original music, networking constantly, probably waitressing or bartending, to pay bills while building her music career, being broke and uncertain for possibly years, facing constant rejection, dealing with criticism and comparison. When Hannah really sat with what it would require, she realized something important. She didn't actually want to do those things, not because she couldn't, but because the cost was higher than her desire for the outcome. She loved singing, but she loved it as a joyful part of her life, not as a all-consuming career pursuit that required those specific sacrifices. That's healthy acceptance. Hannah didn't need to be a professional singer to have singing in her life. She joined a local choir. She performed at open mic nights regularly. She recorded songs and shared them online for fun. She had music in her life in a way that brought her joy without requiring the sacrifices that professional pursuit would demand. But here's the key. Hannah could only reach that healthy acceptance After honestly examining what real pursuit would require and making an active choice, she didn't use the final excuse to avoid trying. She tried in a genuine way, learned what it would really take, and then made an informed decision about what she actually wanted. That's completely different from the final excuse, which is what happens when you convince yourself you're not meant to achieve something before you've even honestly tried. When you use the final excuse, you're making a choice from fear, not from knowledge, and that's what keeps you stuck. I knew a man named William Chen from San Francisco who had spent 20 years using the final excuse about starting his own business. Maybe I'm just meant to be an employee, he'd say. Maybe entrepreneurship is for other people. I should be grateful for my stable job. But William was miserable in his stable job. He dreamed constantly about being his own boss, setting his own schedule, building something of his own. The final excuse wasn't bringing him peace or gratitude. It was bringing him quiet desperation masked as acceptance. When William finally dropped the final excuse and actually tried to start a business, he discovered something interesting. He failed. His first business idea didn't work out. Neither did his second. His third idea showed some promise, but eventually fizzled. And you know what? That was okay, because William was finally living like someone who was trying, instead of someone who had already accepted defeat. William's fourth business idea worked. 5 years after dropping the final excuse, he's running a successful consulting firm. But even if that fourth idea hadn't worked, William would still be better off than when he was using the final excuse, because trying and failing is 1,000 times better than never trying and wondering what could have been for the rest of your life. The final excuse robs you of more than achievement. It robs you of the experience of really going for something, of testing yourself, of discovering what you're capable of the pride that comes from genuine effort, regardless of outcome. It condemns you to a life of safe choices and quiet regret. So how do you know if you're using the final excuse or making a healthy acceptance? Ask yourself these questions. Have I actually tried with real, sustained effort? Have I learned from failures and adjusted my approach? Or did I quit after the first setback? Am I choosing acceptance from a place of peace or a place of fear? If I continue with this acceptance, will I be at peace with it in 10 years? Or will I regret not trying? Your answers will tell you the truth. If you haven't really tried, you're using the final excuse. If you quit after initial difficulty without learning and adapting, you're using the final excuse. If your acceptance feels like defeat rather than peace, you're using the final excuse. If you know you'll regret this choice later, you're using the final excuse. Drop it. Drop the final excuse like you've dropped all the others, because you deserve to actually find out what you're capable of before you decide what's possible for you. You deserve to try with real effort before you accept limitations. You deserve to fail nobly rather than quit safely. The universe doesn't have a predetermined plan for you. There's no cosmic judge deciding what you're meant to achieve. You create meaning through your choices and actions. You become who you decide to become, and the only person who can determine what's possible for you is you, through the act of trying. Maybe you'll achieve the goal. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll discover something even better along the way. Maybe you'll fail and learn and try something different. But all of those outcomes are better than hiding behind the final excuse and never finding out We've reached the end of this audiobook, but we're actually at a beginning. Your beginning. The moment where you decide whether everything you've heard today was just interesting information, or whether it's going to be the catalyst for actual change in your life. Let me be direct with you. Most people who hear this message will do nothing with it. They'll agree with everything I've said. They'll recognize themselves in the stories. They'll even feel inspired for a day or two, and then they'll go right back to their excuses, their comfort zones, their familiar patterns of avoiding risk and possibility. Why? Because knowing what to do is not the same as doing what you know. Information without implementation is just entertainment, and most people are way more comfortable being entertained by the idea of change than actually doing the uncomfortable work of changing. But you're not most people. If you were, you wouldn't have made it this far. Most people would have quit listening hours ago, would have found some excuse to stop before the message could really sink in. The fact that you're still here tells me something about you. You're ready. Maybe you don't feel ready. Maybe you're scared. Maybe you're full of doubt, but somewhere deep inside, you know it's time. Time to stop making excuses and start making progress. Time to stop hiding behind logic and start facing your fears. Time to stop settling for comfort and start pursuing your potential. Time to stop being the person who wishes and becomes the person who does. So let's talk about what happens next. What do you actually do with everything you've learned? How do you take this information and turn it into transformation? I'm going to give you a concrete action plan, starting right now, today, this moment. First, within the next hour, I want you to do something symbolic that marks this as a turning point. It doesn't have to be huge. In fact, it's better if it's small, but significant. Write down your number one goal, the one you've been making excuses about, not Sunday goals. The goal that matters most to you right now. Write it down on paper, in present tense, as if it's already done. I am, not, I will. Second, write down every excuse you've been using about this goal. Get them all out. Every reason why you can't, why it's not the right time, why you're not ready, why circumstances aren't right. Look at that list and recognize these excuses for what they are. Fears dressed up as logic. Third, perform the excuse autopsy we talked about. Take your biggest excuse and ask the deeper questions. What am I actually afraid of? What would I do if this excuse disappeared? Have others achieved this despite this obstacle? Keep going until you get to the real fear underneath the excuse. Fourth, create your identity statement. Who do you need to become to achieve this goal? Write it down. I am a person who. Make it present tense. Make it definitive. Say it out loud. Say it multiple times. Start believing it because it's true right now, not someday. Fifth, design your momentum machine. What's the smallest possible daily action that moves you toward your goal? Make it so small you can't fail. 5 minutes, 100 words, 1 phone call, 1 rep. Whatever it is, commit to doing it every single day for the next 30 days, no exception. 6. Assess your excuse ecosystem. Look at the people in your life and honestly determine who will support your growth and who will resist it. Make a plan for setting boundaries with the resistors and deepening connection with the supporters. 7. And this is crucial. Take one action toward your goal today, not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Right now, as soon as you finish listening to this, something real and tangible that proves to yourself that you're serious this time. Make a phone call, send an email, do research, practice a skill, anything that creates real forward movement. That's your action plan. 7 steps. You can complete all 7 within the next 24 hours, if you choose to. Notice I said if you choose to, not if you have time, or if circumstances allow. Because you have time, circumstances will never be perfect. The only question is whether you choose to prioritize this, or whether you choose to let it slide while you accumulate more excuses. Let me tell you what's going to happen. If you actually do these 7 steps, you're going to feel scared. That's good. Fear means you're doing something that matters. You're going to feel excited. That's the feeling of possibility after years of resignation. You're going to feel doubtful. Your brain will offer you new improved excuses for why this won't work. Thank your brain for trying to keep you safe, and do it anyway. But most importantly, you're going to feel different. You're going to feel like someone who takes action instead of someone who just thinks about taking action. And that difference, that identity shift from thinker to doer, is worth more than any single achievement. I want to tell you one last story. It's about a man named Robert Mitchell from Dallas, Texas. Robert listened to content like this for years: audiobooks, podcasts, seminars, courses. He had consumed so much personal development material that he could have taught it himself, but Robert hadn't actually achieved any of his major goals. He was an expert in transformation theory, with zero transformation in his actual life. Robert was what I call a chronic learner. He was addicted to the feeling of inspiration that comes from learning new strategies without ever experiencing the growth that comes from implementing them. Learning felt productive without being risky. It gave him the comfort of feeling like he was doing something while actually doing nothing. One day, Robert had a moment of brutal honesty with himself. He realized he'd been using personal development content as just another form of excuse. I can't start yet because I need to learn more. I need one more course. I need to fully understand the process before I begin. These were just sophisticated excuses that let him avoid the discomfort of actually trying. So Robert made a radical decision. He stopped consuming any new personal development content for 6 months. No audiobooks, no podcasts, no courses. Instead, he took everything he already knew and actually implemented it. He picked one goal. He dropped his excuses. He took daily action. He built momentum. 6 months later, Robert had achieved more than in the previous 6 years of constant learning. Why? Because he'd shifted from knowing to doing, from consuming to creating, from learning about transformation to actually transforming. I'm telling you Robert's story because I don't want this audiobook to become just another consumption experience for you. I don't want you to finish this. Feel inspired for a moment, add it to your mental list of interesting things I've learned, and then do nothing with it. You don't need more information. You already have everything you need. You need implementation. You need to close this audiobook when it ends, and immediately take action. Not perfect action, not comfortable action, just action. Real, tangible, forward movement toward what you actually want, instead of away from what you're afraid of. Think about where you'll be 1 year from today. if you actually apply what you've learned, if you drop your excuses and commit to your goal, if you build momentum with small daily actions, if you shift your identity to match your aspirations, if you navigate your ecosystem with wisdom and boundaries, 1 year from now, you could be living a completely different life. Not because your circumstances magically changed, but because you changed. You stopped being the person who makes excuses and became the person who makes things happen. You stopped waiting for perfect conditions and started creating progress in imperfect conditions. You stopped settling for comfort and started pursuing your potential. Or, 1 year from now, you could be exactly where you are right now. Same job you don't love, same shape you're unhappy with, same dreams postponed for another year, same excuses, maybe with slightly different phrasing, same gap between who you are and who you know you could be. The choice is yours. It's always been yours. Your circumstances don't choose for you. Other people don't choose for you. The economy doesn't choose for you. Your past doesn't choose for you. You choose. Right now, in this moment, you choose. And let me tell you something that might surprise you. The hard part isn't achieving the goal. The hard part is deciding to stop making excuses about achieving the goal. Once you truly decide, once you commit with your whole being, achievement becomes almost inevitable. It might take longer than you want. It might look different than you imagined, but it will happen because you won't accept any other outcome. I've seen this pattern hundreds of times. People struggle for years making excuses. Then something shifts. They decide, really decide. And within months, they've made more progress than in all the previous years combined. Not because they suddenly got talented or lucky or blessed with perfect circumstances, because they stopped arguing with reality and started creating the reality they wanted. You can be that person. You can have that shift today, right now, not someday when you feel ready, not eventually when circumstances improve. Now, in this moment, you can draw a line and say, before this moment, I was someone who made excuses. After this moment, I am someone who makes things happen. That's all it takes. One decision, one moment of courage, one choice to step into who you actually are, instead of hiding behind who you've been. And everything changes from that moment forward. As we close, I want you to remember something important. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's not about never feeling fear or doubt again. It's not about achieving every goal you set perfectly on the first try. Life doesn't work that way. This is about becoming someone who tries, someone who takes imperfect action, instead of waiting for perfect conditions. Someone who faces fears instead of manufacturing logical sounding excuses. Someone who builds momentum with small daily steps instead of waiting for massive inspiration. Someone who chooses growth over comfort, possibility over security, and courageous action over safe resignation. You will still feel afraid. Sometimes. That's okay. Feel the fear and act anyway. You will still face obstacles. That's okay. Obstacles are just problems to solve, not walls to stop at. You will still have moments of doubt. That's okay. Doubt is just your brain trying to protect you from risk. Thank it and move forward anyway. The parallel universe version of you that I talked about at the beginning, the one who stopped making excuses 5 years ago. They're not fearless. They're not lucky. They're not more talented than you. They just made different choices. They chose action over excuses, and those choices, repeated day after day, created a completely different life. You can make those choices too, starting now, starting today. The gap between you and that other version of yourself doesn't have to keep growing. You can start closing it, one choice at a time, one action at a time, one day at a time. 10 years from now, you're going to be somewhere. You're going to be someone. You're going to look back at this moment, this day, this decision point, and you'll either think that's when everything changed, or that's when I had another opportunity and made another excuse. Which will it be? Only you can decide. But I believe you already know the answer. That's why you're still here. That's why you listened all the way to the end. Because somewhere inside you, you know it's time. Time to kill your excuses and achieve what you're actually capable of achieving. Your excuses have had their time. They've protected you. They've kept you comfortable. They've helped you avoid risk and uncertainty and the possibility of failure, but they've also kept you from your potential, from your dreams, from the life you actually want to live. It's time to let them go, not with anger or judgment, but with gratitude for their service and clarity that you don't need them anymore. You're ready for something different, something more, something real. You're ready to kill your excuses and achieve anything. The question is, will you? Will you actually do it? Or will you let this moment pass and return to business as usual? I hope you choose courage. I hope you choose action. I hope you choose to become the person you've always known you could be, because the world needs what you have to offer. The world needs the version of you that stops hiding behind excuses and starts showing up fully, powerfully, authentically. That version of you is possible. That version of you is waiting. That version of you starts now, in this moment, with one simple decision. No more excuses, only action, only progress, only possibility. Go make it happen. I believe in you. Now believe in yourself. Some mornings Jasmine wrote beautiful prose. Other mornings she wrote garbage. But she wrote every single morning, and after 1 year of this system, she had a complete first draft of her book. 90,000 words. It wasn't perfect, but it existed. And you can edit something that exists. You can't edit a blank page. That's the power of consistency. Small actions repeated over time create massive results, but those actions have to actually happen, which is why you need a system, not just good intentions. Your system should be so simple that you can follow it, even on your worst days. Don't create an elaborate plan that requires peak motivation to execute. Create a minimal viable system that you can maintain through sickness, stress, travel, and chaos. That's what sustainable progress looks like. Stage 5 is calibration. This means regularly assessing what's working and what's not, and adjusting accordingly. Too many people treat their initial plan as sacred and refuse to modify it, even when it's clearly not producing results. That's not commitment, that's stubbornness. Calibration means you set checkpoints. Every week or month, you look at your progress. Honestly, are you moving toward your goal? If yes, Keep doing what you're doing. If no, what needs to change? Maybe your system needs adjustment. Maybe your conditions need improvement. Maybe your goal needs a refinement. I knew a man named Carlos Rivera in Houston who wanted to build a side business doing custom furniture. Carlos had a plan: spend 10 hours every weekend building pieces and selling them online. After 3 months, he'd made exactly 0 sales and was ready to quit. When we did a calibration session, we looked at what was actually happening. Carlos was building beautiful furniture, but he'd spent almost no time on marketing or selling. He assumed if he built great products, people would automatically find him. That assumption was wrong. So Carlos calibrated. He changed his system: 5 hours building, 5 hours marketing, and building an online presence. Within 2 months, he made his first sale. Within 6 months, he had more orders than he could fill and had to hire an assistant. The goal didn't change. The commitment didn't change. But the approach calibrated based on reality. That's the achievement blueprint. Clarity about what you want. Commitment to paying the price. Conditions that support your goal. Consistency through systems. Calibration based on results. These 5 stages work for any goal, but only if you actually implement them. Most people fail not because the blueprint doesn't work, but because they skip stages. They jump straight to action without clarity or commitment. They rely on willpower instead of conditions. They pursue inspiration instead of consistency. They stick with failing approaches instead of calibrating. Don't make those mistakes. Follow the blueprint in order. Do each stage thoroughly before moving to the next, and watch what happens when you combine a clear goal with real commitment, supportive conditions, consistent systems, and regular calibration. That combination is unstoppable. Here's something most people don't understand about achievement. You can't outperform your identity. Let me say that again, because it's crucial. You cannot outperform your identity. Your results in life are almost always a reflection of who you believe yourself to be. And if you want to achieve things you've never achieved before, you need to become someone you've never been before. This is where most people get stuck. They try to change their actions while keeping their identity the same. They want different results, but they still think of themselves in the same old way, and that creates an internal conflict that sabotages every effort they make. Let me explain what I mean by identity. Your identity is the story you tell yourself about who you are. It's the collection of beliefs, labels, and narratives that define you in your own mind. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad with money. I'm shy. I'm not creative. I'm not the kind of person who can run a business. These aren't facts about reality. They're stories about yourself that you've accepted as true. And here's the problem. Once you accept an identity, your brain works incredibly hard to make your behavior consistent with that identity. If you believe you're not a morning person, you will sabotage every attempt to wake up early, because waking up early conflicts with your identity. If you believe you're bad with money, you will make poor financial decisions that confirm that identity. Your brain would rather be consistent than be successful. I worked with a man named Tyler Bennett from Charlotte, North Carolina, who was trying to lose weight. Tyler had tried every diet, every workout program, every weight loss strategy you can imagine. He'd lose 20 or 30 pounds, then gain it all back. This pattern had repeated for over a decade. When I asked Tyler to describe himself, here's what he said. I'm a big guy. I've always been big. It runs in my family. I'm just built this way. That was his identity. He saw himself fundamentally as a big person who occasionally tried to lose weight, but because his core identity was big guy, his brain treated weight loss as a temporary deviation from his true self, not a permanent change. So he'd always eventually return to behaviors that matched his identity. We had to change Tyler's identity before we could change his body. I had him start saying and believing different things about himself. Not, I'm a big guy trying to lose weight, but I'm an athlete in training. Not, I'm trying to eat healthy, but I'm the kind of person who fuels my body properly. Not, I'm working out, but I'm training because that's what athletes do. This might sound like silly word games, but identity is powerful. When Tyler started identifying as an athlete, everything shifted. Athletes don't skip workouts. Athletes don't eat junk food regularly. Athletes take their training seriously. Tyler wasn't trying to behave like an athlete while secretly believing he was just a big guy. He was actually being an athlete because that's who he believed he was. 2 years later, Tyler had lost 80 pounds and kept it off. But more importantly, his entire relationship with his body had changed. He didn't see exercise and healthy eating as temporary efforts to fix a problem. He saw them as expressions of who he fundamentally was, an athlete, someone who takes care of their body, because that's what athletes do. This is the identity shift you need to make for whatever goal you're pursuing. You can't achieve it by trying to act like the person who has achieved that goal while still identifying as the person who hasn't. You need to actually become that person in your own mind first. The actions will follow naturally. Think about your goal right now. Who do you need to become to achieve that goal? Not what do you need to do, but who do you need to be? If your goal is to start a successful business, you need to become an entrepreneur, not someone trying to start a business. An entrepreneur, that's your identity. If your goal is to write a book, you need to become a writer, not someone who wants to write someday. A writer. Writers write. That's what they do. If your goal is to be financially secure, you need to become someone who makes smart money decisions, not someone trying to save money, someone who is financially responsible as a core part of their identity. I know a woman named Sophia Martinez from Miami who wanted to become a professional photographer. For years, Sophia took photos as a hobby and dreamed of doing it professionally. But she never made the leap. Why? Because in her mind, she was just an amateur who takes nice pictures. That was her identity. When Sophia made the identity shift, everything changed. She started introducing herself as a photographer, not as an accountant who likes photography. She invested in professional equipment, not as a Sunday purchase, but because photographers have professional tools. She created a business website and business cards because that's what professional photographers do. She started charging for her work, even when it felt scary, because professionals get paid. None of Sophia's skills changed overnight. She didn't suddenly become a better photographer, but her behavior changed completely because her identity changed. And when her behavior changed, her results changed. Within a year, Sophia was booking enough photography sessions to match her accounting income. Within 2 years, she transitioned to photography full-time. But here's what Sophia told me that really drives this point home. She said, the skills were always there. The talent was always there. What was missing was permission to be who I actually was. I'd been waiting for someone to anoint me as a real photographer. Once I realized I could anoint myself, everything became possible. That's the power of the identity shift. You don't need permission from anyone else to become who you need to be. You just need to give yourself permission. You need to stop thinking of yourself as someone who wants to achieve something and start thinking of yourself as someone who is achieving it right now. Let me give you a practical framework for making this shift. It's called the identity statement, and it's incredibly simple but powerful. You create a statement that defines who you are in relation to your goal, not who you want to be, who you are. Present tense, definitive. Here's the format. I am a person who, hi, and then you complete it with the identity that supports your goal. I am a person who invests in myself. I am a person who follows through on commitments. I am a person who creates value for others. I am a person who takes care of their health. I am a person who learns from failure instead of being defeated by it. Write your identity statement and say it to yourself every single day, multiple times a day, if possible. Not as an affirmation you're trying to convince yourself to believe, but as a statement of fact about who you actually are. Because here's the thing, you get to decide who you are. Nobody else decides that for you. I worked with a young man named Jordan Hayes from Portland, Oregon, who was trying to overcome a video game addiction that was destroying his life. Jordan was playing games 8 to 10 hours a day. He'd lost jobs because of it. His relationship had ended because of it. He'd tried to quit dozens of times and always relapsed. Jordan's problem wasn't lack of willpower or discipline. His problem was identity. In his mind, he was a gamer. That's how he saw himself. That's how his friends saw him. That's how he'd defined himself since he was a teenager. Gaming wasn't just something he did. It was who he was. We had to rebuild Jordan's identity from the ground up. Who do you actually want to be? I asked him. Jordan thought about it for a long time. I want to be someone who builds things in the real world instead of virtual worlds. He finally said, perfect. That became Jordan's new identity. I am a person who builds things in the real world. Every time he was tempted to game, he'd ask himself, is this what someone who builds real things does? The answer was obvious, so he'd make a different choice that aligned with his new identity. Jordan started learning carpentry. He volunteered with Habitat for Humanity. He took online courses in web development. These weren't willpower battles where he was trying not to game. These were expressions of who he now was, a person who builds real things. Gaming just didn't fit that identity anymore. 3 years later, Jordan runs a small carpentry business and hasn't played a video game in over 2 years. Not because he's white-knuckling through temptation every day, but because that's simply not who he is anymore. He's a builder. Builders build. They don't spend 10 hours a day in virtual worlds. This is what I want you to understand. Behavior change is hard when it conflicts with your identity. Behavior change is natural when it aligns with your identity. So stop trying to force yourself to do things that contradict who you believe yourself to be. Instead, change who you believe yourself to be and watch how naturally the right behaviors follow. Your excuses are often expressions of your old identity. I can't do that really means that's not who I am. I'm not the kind of person who is a direct identity statement that limits what you believe is possible for you. I've always been this way, is your old identity defending itself against change. When you make the identity shift, those excuses lose their power. You're not trying to become someone different. You already are someone different, and this new person does things differently, thinks differently, and gets different results. Not someday, right now. Now we need to talk about something that might be uncomfortable. The people around you are probably invested in your excuses, not because they're bad people or they don't love you, but because your excuses serve a function in your relationships and social environment. And when you start killing your excuses, that ecosystem is going to resist. Let me explain what I mean. Every excuse you make exists within a social context. The people in your life have adapted to your excuses. They've built their expectations around your limitations. They've found ways that your excuses serve their needs. And when you change, it disrupts the entire system. I worked with a woman named Rachel Cooper from Denver who wanted to go back to school and finish her college degree. Rachel had dropped out 15 years earlier to help support her family, and she'd been making the excuse, "I don't have time. I have too many family responsibilities," ever since. But here's what Rachel didn't see. Her family had organized their entire lives around Rachel being available. Her mother called her constantly for help with errands. Her siblings relied on her for free babysitting. Her friends expected her to be available for lunch and social activities. Rachel's excuse about family responsibilities wasn't just her excuse. It was everyone else's justification for depending on her unlimited availability. When Rachel announced she was going back to school and would have limited availability, her family's reaction shocked her. Her mother got angry. "I thought family was important to you," she said. Her sister accused her of being selfish. Her friends acted hurt that she was abandoning them. Nobody said, "Congratulations, I'm proud of you." Everyone said some version of, "What about us?" This is the excuse ecosystem in action. Rachel's excuse had become a load-bearing wall in other people's lives. When she removed it, the structure felt threatened. Her family wasn't actually trying to hold her back. They were just trying to maintain the system they'd grown comfortable with. A system where Rachel was always available. Understanding this dynamic is crucial because you need to prepare for it. When you kill your excuses and start pursuing your goals, some people in your life are going to resist. Not overtly maybe. They probably won't say, "I don't want you to succeed." Instead, they'll express concern. They'll point out risks. They'll remind you of your responsibilities. They'll suggest that maybe you should wait a little longer. These people think they're being helpful. They think they're protecting you. But what they're actually doing is protecting the ecosystem that your excuses have created. And you need to be ready to move forward anyway, with love and compassion, but without letting their resistance become your new excuse. Let me tell you about a man named Gregory Thompson from Chicago. Gregory wanted to leave his corporate job and start a coaching business, helping other professionals transition careers. But Gregory's wife was terrified of the financial risk. She'd grown up poor, and financial security was her top priority. Gregory's stable corporate job with good benefits wasn't just his excuse for not pursuing his dream. It was the foundation of his wife's sense of security. When Gregory brought up the idea of leaving his job. His wife panicked. They had huge fights. She accused him of being irresponsible and selfish. She asked how he could even consider risking their family's stability, and Gregory, who loved his wife and didn't want to hurt her, almost gave up on his dream to keep the peace. But we worked through a different approach. Instead of framing it as I'm leaving my job and you have to deal with it, Gregory created a transition plan that addressed his wife's concerns. He would build his coaching business on the side for a year while keeping his job. He would save 6 months of expenses before making any transition. He would only leave his corporate job when his coaching income matched 50% of his corporate salary. He would keep their health insurance through Cobra or the marketplace. This plan wasn't about asking permission or letting fear win. It was about acknowledging legitimate concerns within his ecosystem while still moving toward his goal. Gregory's wife still wasn't thrilled, but she could live with the plan because it addressed her real fears instead of just dismissing them. 2 years later, Gregory runs a thriving coaching business, and his wife is one of his biggest supporters. She saw him succeed in the early stages. She saw that he could actually do this. She saw that taking calculated risks didn't lead to disaster. The ecosystem adapted to the new reality instead of collapsing. But here's the critical thing. This only worked because Gregory didn't let his wife's fear become his new excuse. He could have easily said, I can't pursue my dream because my wife won't support it. That would have been a comfortable excuse that let him avoid risk while blaming someone else. Instead, he took responsibility for managing both his goal and his relationship. Sometimes, the excuse ecosystem is more subtle. I knew a woman named Vanessa Price from Austin who wanted to lose weight and get healthy. Vanessa's excuse was, my friends and family are all overweight too. That's just how we are in my family. But when Vanessa started eating healthy and exercising, something interesting happened. Her family started sabotaging her, not obviously, but through constant subtle pressure. Her mother would make Vanessa's favorite unhealthy foods and act hurt when she didn't eat them. Her friends would pressure her to skip workouts and join them for happy hour. Her siblings would make comments like, oh, you think you're better than us now, when she ordered a salad. Vanessa's family wasn't trying to keep her unhealthy. They were unconsciously resisting the change, because Vanessa's transformation made them uncomfortable about their own choices. If Vanessa could change, that meant they could too, and they didn't want to face that possibility. It was easier to pull Vanessa back into old patterns than to confront their own excuses. Vanessa had to make a hard choice. She couldn't control her family's reactions. She could only control her own choices. So she kept going to the gym, even when friends pressured her not to. She brought her own healthy food to family gatherings. She kindly but firmly set boundaries about her health decisions. And gradually, the ecosystem adapted. Some people got inspired and started their own health journeys. Others just accepted that this was the new Vanessa. Here's what you need to understand about the excuse ecosystem. Changing yourself will change your relationships, and not everyone will be happy about it. Some people will support you, some people will resist you, some people will leave your life entirely, and as hard as that is, it's necessary for your growth. You cannot achieve extraordinary things while maintaining ordinary relationships unchanged. The people who truly love you will adapt to your growth. The people who only loved who you used to be will struggle with who you're becoming. And that's okay. That's part of the process. I want to give you a framework for navigating the excuse ecosystem. It's called the 4 circles, and it helps you understand who to listen to and who to protect yourself from as you pursue your goals. Circle 1 is your advocates. These are people who genuinely want you to succeed and will support you even when it's inconvenient for them. They'll cheer you on, help you problem solve, and hold you accountable. These people are gold. Keep them close. Listen to their advice. Let them into your journey. Circle 2 is your adapters. These are people who are initially resistant to your changes, but who will eventually adapt and accept the new you. They might push back at first because change is uncomfortable, but they fundamentally love you and will adjust. Be patient with these people, but don't let their initial resistance stop you. Circle 3 is your anchors. These are people who are heavily invested in you, staying the same because your excuses serve their needs. They'll actively, even if unconsciously, try to pull you back into old patterns. You need to set firm boundaries with these people. Limit their influence in your life during this crucial growth period. Circle 4 is your adversaries. These are people who actively don't want you to succeed, either because of their own insecurities or because your success threatens them in some way. This is rare, but it happens. When you identify adversaries, you need to remove them from your life, or at least from your inner circle. Don't share your goals with them. Don't seek their approval. Protect your vision from their negativity. Look at the people in your life right now and honestly assess which circle they're in. This isn't about judging them or deciding who's good or bad. It's about understanding who will support your growth and who will resist it, so you can navigate your relationships strategically. Rachel from Denver discovered that her mother was an anchor, constantly pulling her back into caretaking mode. So Rachel set boundaries. She could help her mother twice a week, but the other days were for school. Her mother was angry at first, but eventually adapted. Rachel's sister turned out to be an advocate. Once she understood how important this was to Rachel, Gregory from Chicago realized his wife was an adapter. She was scared, but she fundamentally wanted him to be happy. By addressing her fears directly and creating a solid plan, he helped her adapt to the new direction. Vanessa from Austin had to accept that some of her friends were anchors who weren't going to support her health journey. She pulled back from those friendships and found new friends at the gym who shared her values. It was painful, but necessary. Your excuse ecosystem will test you. People will, intentionally or not, give you reasons to quit. They'll remind you of past failures. They'll point out obstacles. They'll make you feel guilty for prioritizing yourself. And if you're not prepared for this, their resistance will become your new excuse. I would pursue my dream, but my spouse doesn't support it. I would make changes, but my family needs me. I would take the risk, but people are depending on me. These are just new versions of the same old excuses, now dressed up as relationship obligations. Don't fall for it. You can love people and still pursue your goals. You can maintain relationships and still grow. You can care about others' feelings and still make choices they don't initially understand, but you have to be willing to let the ecosystem shift. You have to be willing to disappoint some people temporarily on your way to becoming who you're meant to be. Because here's the truth, the people who truly love you will still be there when you achieve your goals, and the people who only loved your excuses will fade away. That's not a loss. That's growth. That's evolution. That's you becoming someone who achieves things instead of someone who has really good reasons for not achieving things. We're in the home stretch now, and I need to talk to you about one of the most powerful forces in achievement, momentum. Because here's what most people don't understand. Starting is hard. Continuing is hard. But once you build real momentum, achievement becomes almost inevitable. The question is, how do you build that momentum in the first place? Momentum is physics applied to human behavior. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. When you're sitting still, making excuses, not taking action, there's enormous resistance to starting. Every excuse feels heavy. Every obstacle feels insurmountable. The gap between where you are and where you want to be feels impossibly wide. But once you start moving, once you take that first real action, something shifts. The second action is easier than the first. The third is easier than the second. As you build momentum, the excuses get quieter. The obstacles feel smaller. The path forward becomes clearer. You're not trying to overcome resistance anymore. You're being carried forward by the momentum you've created. Let me tell you about a man named Kevin Walsh from Philadelphia. Kevin wanted to write and publish a book about his experience overcoming addiction. He'd been thinking about this book for 7 years. 7 years. And in those 7 years, he'd written exactly 0 words. Why? Because the project felt enormous, overwhelming, impossible. Where do you even start with something that big? Kevin's excuse was, I don't have time to write a whole book. And he was right, in a sense. He didn't have time to write the entire book in one sitting. Nobody does. But that's not how books get written. Books get written 1 page at a time, 1 paragraph at a time, 1 sentence at a time. The problem wasn't the lack of time. The problem was the lack of momentum. When Kevin finally started, he committed to something ridiculously small. 100 words per day. That's it. Not a chapter, not even a full page, just 100 words. Some days, those 100 words took him 10 minutes. Other days, they took an hour because he was struggling, but he wrote them every single day. Here's what happened. On day 1, writing 100 words day 2 felt a little easier. By day 10, Kevin would often write 100 words and then keep going because he had momentum. Some days he'd write 300 words, some days 500, but the commitment was always just 100, which meant he could always keep the streak alive, even on his worst days. After 1 year of writing 100 words per day, Kevin had a complete manuscript, 36,000 words. A full book. Not because he found massive chunks of time, not because he became more motivated, but because he built momentum with the smallest possible action, and then let that momentum carry him forward. This is the momentum machine. You start with an action so small that excuses can't touch it. You do that action consistently until it builds momentum. Then you ride that momentum toward your goal. It's simple, but it's incredibly powerful. The key is making your initial action small enough that you can't fail. Most people sabotage their momentum before it even starts by setting the bar too high. They commit to working out for an hour every day, and when they miss a day, the momentum dies. They commit to making 100 sales calls per week, and when they fall short, they quit entirely. But if you commit to something so small that it feels almost trivial, you can build an unbreakable streak. And that streak creates momentum. The streak becomes your identity. I'm someone who writes every day. I'm someone who exercises every day. I'm someone who does the work. And once that becomes your identity, the specific amount stops mattering as much as the consistency. I worked with a woman named Alicia Martinez from Seattle, who wanted to get in shape but had failed at every fitness program she'd ever tried. The reason was always the same. She'd start strong, miss a few days, feel like she'd broken the program, and quit entirely. No momentum, just repeated attempts that fizzled out.